Well, God bless all of you on today. I'm grateful to be here with another Clergy Conversation. I'm excited for our special guest on today, who is a great preacher, a great person, and a fun person, and a Yankees fan, which I'm grateful for as well. He is pastor of the Mount Pisgah Missionary Baptist Church of Kokomo, Indiana, and this is none other than Reverend Dr. Lonnie Anderson. So, Pastor Anderson, thank you for being a part of this on today.
And thank you very much for having me.
So I want to jump right into it and just give us a little bit of your background.
Oh man, little old me, I was born and raised in Modesto, California. Accepted Christ at the age of 12. Grew up in the Christian Love Baptist Church in the city of Modesto, California. Migrated to Bakersfield, California, where I accepted my call under the late Dr. Ishmael Kimbrell, the People's Missionary Baptist Church. After my first sermon, a group of about 14 pastors sent me to Selma University in Selma, Alabama, where I attended Selma University and got dual bachelor's degrees. Um, got another master's from Selma. Was called to the Berean Baptist Church in Marion, Alabama. Stayed there for 6.5 years. Let's see. Was called in 2001 to the Mount Pisgah Baptist Church here in the city of Kokomo. Got another Master's of Divinity, and I just completed all of my doctoral work as of November the 10th, I believe, November the 10th, and I'm officially through with school, and I'm just grateful for that. And Alpha Phi Alpha, that's my fraternity. Yankee fan, uh, Cowboy fan, Spurs fan, Alabama Crimson Tide. Those are my top four. That's it.
Well, you're doing good with Yankees. Then you just, I'll let you. I'll let you. I won't talk bad about the Spurs. Spurs, but the other two, we could have did. We could have did without them. But there's one thing that you did say in your background that I want you to share with us, because I think for those who may not know the legacy of the late Dr. Ishmael Kimbrough, just talk to us about his legacy, his ministry, because he definitely was one of God's great preachers, and of course a great friend of my late pastor, Reverend Dr. Eglin Woodbury. So just talk to us about Dr. Kimbrough.
Man, I call him Uncle Woody. Yeah, Dr. Woodbury was an awesome preacher. Pastor Kimbrough was a preacher's lover. Preachers loved him. One of his ministries that he believed was putting together preachers that have been broken, who have been strained, who have been hurt. He was known as a preacher's preacher. He had an awesome, amazing preaching gift and teaching gift. He was definitely a pastor personified. He was just known throughout the nation of just loving on preachers, and I think that has kind of, dwindled, kind of trickled down to his sons in the ministry. He was a awesome father in the ministry, just absolutely one. And I did not know that Dr. Woodbury was your father in the ministry. Yeah.
Well, I never started preaching under him, but I was born in Mount Olive.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Woodbury was quite a preacher. Both of them together. In fact, the last time
Absolutely.
I seen him alive was at Pastor Kimbrough's services. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So then, when did you first become? When did you accept Christ, and what was the experience?
If you are a member of the Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, you know the story of our heart. I accepted Jesus Christ on a Friday at the Christian Love Baptist Church in the kitchen, on top of the kitchen table. I'd given the Vacation Bible School staff total chaos because I did not want to be in Vacation Bible School. And on Friday, when I just raised all kind of hell throughout the week, finally, the young lady asked me, she says, Lonnie, don't you want Christ and your Savior? My heart literally melted. And it was on top of that table that I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Best decision I ever made in my life.
So, when was your first inclination of call to ministry?
I was about 7 years old.
Okay.
I knew that the Lord had his hands laid on me, even at the age of 7. It's interesting. All of my games, I had army men, but it was like a church. I would put them. I'm not for sure. You're probably too young to remember the army man that kind of held his hand like that. Well, that was me. I said in the front, that army man in the choir, and so church was an integral part of my life. I was born and raised in there, and my mother and my father definitely um, exemplified what Christian um, discipleship was all about because they definitely discipled all of their children. And so I knew at the age of 7 years old that I was going to preach. I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that I had a fascination. It's interesting, when I was a little kid, I would sleep during the choir. And when the preacher was up, I'd be listening and taking notes, even at the age of 7 or 8 years old. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, what was your first sermon?
Where do we go from here? And
Mm.
um, it was for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, whosoever believes in him shall not perish, have everlasting life. John 3:16. Where do we go from here? And I talked about what here was, and who do we go to? Yeah.
So, what
You
would
made
you
me bring
say
up.
that you said what?
I said you made me bring up some. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Yes,
So then, what would you say to those who who may have had the situation you have had even now, who might be like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and feel that call to preach, and they may feel the call to preach, or they may feel nervous because from historically you hear guys who have been called early, but there was also this people are watching them now. It's like they feel like their childhood was kind of taken away just because of that. So what would you tell somebody who may have that who may feel the call at a young age, but also may have some hesitancy as well?
well, I definitely can speak on that. I had definitely great reservations and hesitations as it pertains to preaching at a young age. And I ran from ministry for I almost probably about 15, 16 years until literally it was like a labor pain where I couldn't stand it anymore and I had to accept it. I would say to any young person who believes that God has a call on their life into the ministry, the gospel ministry, preaching, I would definitely say it would be my prayer first that they are with a pastor who understands that call, a pastor who is sensitive to their needs as a young potential minister and as a young person, period. So I guess my advice would be definitely seek the counsel of your pastor. And then my prayer would be that that pastor would be someone who's very sensitive, very serious, very sober minded as it pertains to what ministry is. So that would probably be um, my prayer and my hope and my instructions.
Absolutely. And as you are starting to preach, were there many preaching opportunities for you? How were you growing?
Well, I was growing. I sat at the feet of my pastor, and if I could just recommend that to any aspiring preacher, that they sit at the feet of their pastor. YouTube is okay and all that other stuff, but you need a pastor that will nurture you, a pastor that will guide you, correct you, invest in you, and so forth. So I spent most of my time in Bible study. Pastor Kimbrough had, I think, 4 Bible studies a week. I was in almost all 4 of the Bible studies. Every time he preached, I was there. And most of the time, it's interesting, Brown, that most of the time, my greatest lessons from my pastor came while I was driving him around or just sitting around the office talking to him, and he would impute um, different um, different nuggets and precepts and principles and so forth. So I would say this. Um, I would definitely say spend time at the feet of your pastor, listening and learning what ministry is, learning how to love people, learning how to deal with difficult situations and so forth. So most definitely.
Do you feel that as we are in the church culture now with younger preachers, older preacher, as we talk about sitting under our pastor, which it's important to sit under your pastor, but do you feel that there is in a sense that there might be a disconnect between maybe some young preachers, some young pastors, in a sense, may not necessarily feel like they need a pastor, like how you grew up compared to our generation? What do you see in a sense is maybe like the differences between the value of really having a pastor and learning from your pastor?
Well, what I've seen lately is, and this is not a blanket statement that would engulf every young preacher, because certainly there are some that are not what I'm about to say. And I am seeing lately that a lot of young preachers, there's a lot of disrespect as it pertains to senior pastors. And then I see the disrespect, and I also see the neglect from senior pastors um, to the sons or so forth in the ministry. Um, I'm not liking, uh, Brown, what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a group of young preachers that their YouTube pastors have more influence over
Mm,
them than their pastors, their local pastors. I'm just seeing that. Um, as for me, I was greatly influenced by my pastor and all of his dear friends, Uncle Woody, Uncle Cannon, Uncle Roland, Uncle Thomas, Uncle Lane, all the way down the line. And so, what I'm seeing really is that there's a disconnect between the senior established sages of the ministry and some of the newer, younger preachers. It doesn't seem to be perhaps a commitment from neither part on um, joining together and learning. Because really, I think, at our church right now, I have active, I have 14 sons in the ministry right here at our church right now. And I try to spend time with them. I try to spend, they have a lot to teach me. My youth pastor teaches me some of this new age stuff. And, I try to be hip too. You know what I'm saying?
mm. So then, I guess, and then where I'm going with that is just from your experience, and even now as you talk about these concerns in a sense, how do you think we can better bridge the gap between younger preachers, younger pastors, but also our senior pastors, our senior sages? How do we bridge the gap?
Communication. Um, I think that both sides need to see that they have something to offer each other. Um, I think the senior sages of the ministry have the wisdom, but I think some of the younger people like yourself have the energy. And I think some of the senior sages need to understand that they need to be exposed to some of the thinking, even if it's not what to do. They need to be exposed to some of the thinking, some of the mindsets, so they can impart wisdom and so forth. And then also, I think this new generation needs to be able to understand that a lot of these senior sages are where they want to be and have traveled those roads and have the battle scars and the bruises to prove that they are worthy to be listened to. So I think somewhere along the line, Pastor Brown, we need to go back to, oh, that's good. We are in a sense of emergency right now. You are right. Uh, there's a sense of emergency. There's a yeah. We need to go back and reconnect with one another. And
Right.
somewhere along the line, it got disconnected. It got tattered. It got fragmented. It got separated. And I just wish that we could get back together.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think we definitely need to have, those connections. I talked to my pastor, Pastor Brian, and okay, see, me and Dad, we talk about that all the time, just by bringing the two sides together, which is very important. So as you are in school, as you are matriculating in school, is that when you got called to your first church?
It was after I graduated
Okay.
from Selma.
Okay.
University. I graduated in May. I got called to my first church, the Berean Baptist Church, which was a historic church. Um, I got called to a church that had 14 deacons. Now here
Wow.
I am, born and raised in California, and got yeah, I went to a church with 14 deacons. It's a historical church, very instrumental in the civil rights movement. Um, yeah, so I got some battle scars to yeah, but I was able to even handle that because I listened to my pastor. Every pastor still needs a pastor. You need someone that can set you straight, that you can vent to, that you can be personable with, that can hear everything you say. My pastor would hear after things would happen at the church. I would vent, and he would laugh and say, "Okay, after all that stuff, now let's talk about what God expects of you." And every pastor needs a pastor to hold them accountable.
So how was it just being, as you say, you're from California, then you just come to Alabama? Just the culture shock itself, I know was
Dude, oh my gosh. Um, well, knowing Pastor Kimbrough, he was not very traditional, and then going from the West Coast to the South. I mean, I think I took one suit to Alabama, and I think it was a colored shirt, and going to a place that was very traditional. But I had to learn. I think it was one particular day I was calling my Pastor Kimbrough, and Pastor Kimbrough said some words to me that I cannot repeat on your show. But if you call me, I'll tell you exactly what he said. But he just told me, listen, you're not down there to change a culture. You're down there to learn from a culture. They have something to offer you that I could not offer you here. Back in California, I didn't really deal with deacons and trustees and all this stuff, especially at my church that I was at. And so when I got to Alabama, it was my biggest lesson was not necessarily at Selma University. Selma University is where I got the degrees from, but it was with the people, it was with the church life, it was with that culture that I really got my lesson from.
and some people, some preachers who might be watching this, pastors, they get called to historical churches, as you say, landmark churches that have had a culture, that have had a tradition, that have had their own style even before you were born. So and then you're coming in the sense as an outsider because you're from California, but now you're coming to Alabama. But what are some keys that you would say that is important for a pastor or a new pastor who's coming to a situation that is a historical situation, that they are proud of what they are, they're proud of that prestige, those things? How would you say, just from your experience, how would you say it were helpful things and even some of the mistakes you made?
Okay, I'm going to say it without using any expletives. Take your doggone time.
Anybody that knows you knows we understood what you meant.
Take your time.
Yes, sir.
You're only pastor on paper until you become pastor in their hearts. Take your time. Don't go in trying to change things. Take your time. Listen, love the people before you try to lead the people.
Mm.
Um, and if the people, listen, this is what I've discovered in my 27 and a half years of pastoring. Um, People will follow you if they know you love them. Even when they disagree. They may say, I don't agree with you, but at least in their hearts they know that you love them. Um, love the people before you try to lead the people, because there's a lot of resentment and so forth, frustration in pastoring. And if you're trying to lead people that you don't love, it's going to be a disaster. So my statement would be to any new pastor is, hey, love the people. And when the people see that you love them, they're more likely to let you lead them. I think a lot of times we try to come in and just try to change things. You don't know what to change. And it takes, and for God's sake, if you're coming into a historical church, do not try to mar or dismember the reputation or the love or the legacy of your predecessor. Love your predecessor. And I'll tell you another thing. If your predecessor's widow is there, man, love on her as if you would desire someone to love on your wife after you leave. I mean, that woman has shared her husband some 40, 30, 50 years with that church, and love that former pastor's wife. Love on her, and don't try to stamp out and erase his legacy. Go sit
Mm.
down and just love the people.
That is, you just hit on where I was about to go, but you just hit on. So I want you to keep going on that. Is that not just love, but not erasing the memory, the legacy of of your predecessor, because once again there was something that was established before you were there. Now that of course you're going to be your own person, but there is something, as you would say, that healthy balance of still still appreciating your predecessor. So why do you think sometimes that that's not always shown, that appreciation for the predecessor?
Well, Brown, I follow two loved pastors whose tenure, Dr. R.T. Johnson at Berea Baptist Church. I followed him. He was there some 51 years. Um, Dr. F.S. Kemper at the Mount Pisgah Church. He was here for 40 years. And I followed men who had laid a great foundation that I was able to build on, and really rest upon. Um, I think it's suicide for you to go in and try to detach people from their history. Um, I think it's supercilious. It's foolish to try to um, wash away the memories of people. A lot of times when you come into these historical settings, I think one of the downfalls, if it's a downfall, or the pressure, maybe that's a better word, for pastors, is to follow a man that was loved, because there seems to be sometimes an expectation for you to act like him. You have to remember that the church is still mourning, and your presence there kind of also reminds them of what used to be, or what their predecessor, the absence of their predecessor, and so forth. So I would think, Brown, man, the best thing to do again is love the people, love God's people. And another thing, before you go in and start trying to change something, you don't know what to change. I think it was Ezekiel. Uh, he went walking amongst the dry bones before he even preached to them. And walk with the people, love them, and remember, God will give you the church if you just take your time. Don't try to force them, because remember, they've been there longer than you, and they can outpace you. So just love the people.
I think it was Dr. Ralph West in the interview with H. B. Charles. He said something. He said that a lot of times what messes us up is that we go in and don't ask questions. Because he
Mm,
said the average preacher is so happy to get a church that
yes,
he doesn't ask any questions. And Dr. Ralph West said, study the church just like they studied you. Studied the church. And but he said that's one of the main things that hurts us is that a lot of times we might go in and really, as you say, there wants to be a lot of changes, but we really don't ask enough questions.
right. You definitely one of the, if you ask me what to ask, um, for your own vitality in that church, um, you need to ask about the history, especially the history of former pastors. You kind of get a layout of um, the, um, the tone as it pertains to how they feel about pastoring. Now, if you're going to a church and you're the fifth pastor in the last 13 years, dude, you better pay attention. There's some red flags going on. But man, again, learn the culture, learn your congregation, learn the climate, learn the culture of that setting before you go in and try to change things. Man, that's disastrous.
So with your first pastor, you served those 7 years. Just as you were serving the church, how are you growing in your own, as you say, in your own preaching, in your own teaching, in your own pastoring, and in your own just personal life? What were those nuggets, those tools that you took away from that experience that really helped you grow?
Man, my nature is pretty laid back. But there's definitely I definitely got a little fire in me that I had to learn um, to really um, let God handle situations. I couldn't respond to everything that was going on. I had to learn to just let God. Well, I think that going into it again, I think that's the benefit of having a pastor that will help guide you matriculate through your assignment. Um, I had to learn a few things. I had to learn um, uh, to remember that this is about God. One of the best advices that one of the best advice that my pastor, Pastor Kimbrough, gave me, uh, and this is what I want to share with you. And I share this with a lot of my nephews throughout the nation. Um, don't ever make God prove that He can do it without you. Um,
Woo!
that blessed me, and it's how I live out ministry now. This is not about me. It's about God, and I don't ever want Him to show me and to prove to me that it's been His power all along. It's been His protection all along.
Woo!
Want to. I don't ever want God to have to show me that I don't need you, Anderson. I can do this without you.
Woohoo! Did y'all hear that? Everybody's watching. Please tell me y'all heard that. That put a chill through my spine. Don't. Oh, say
Yeah.
that again for the people.
Don't, as pastors and even ministry, and don't ever make God prove that He can do it without you, that He doesn't
Oh,
need you, because He will, because He will, He'll do it. And so, what has always kind of guided and guarded my heart is that I don't ever want God to prove that He can do it without me. I don't, I believe He can. So I'm not going to put Him I'm not going to test them like that. So I always make sure um, to um, uh, ask the Holy Spirit to guide my ambitions, guide my motives, guide my thoughts, guide my desires. Um, I always ask the Lord to show me, show me the unguarded me, because I don't ever want to be so puffed up that God has to say, I can't deal with this anymore. I got to bring you down. I never want that. I don't ever want to be so high that God has to snatch me down.
that's blessed me. I know it's blessed some others. But one thing I forgot to ask you about that first church, I just forgot to ask you how you got called there. Before we move on, I forgot to ask you how you got called to the first assignment.
Oh, wow. It was the late Reverend Darrell Moore from the Second Baptist Church in Selma, Alabama, said there was a church in Marion, Alabama that needs a pastor. And so I was like, and remember, I was assistant pastor at the Ebenezer Baptist Church under the late Dr. F.D. Reese. And so, I was content at being a assistant under Dr. Reese. And the Lord just kind of told me, go ahead and send your resume. And so I sent my resume and I went there to preach. And they called me back to preach again. And later they called me, but it was the late Dr. Darrell Moore from Second Baptist in Selma that hooked us up through the power and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit.
Man, yes sir, yes sir. I'm still tripping about what you just said, so I'm trying. I'm trying to move on, but no, that was definitely helpful. So then, as you are pastoring in Alabama, then you transition to Indiana. So how was that? How did that transition happen? How did they hear about you, or how did you hear about them? What were the steps that led you to Kokomo?
It was Q.E. Hammonds. The Lord had begun to tell me, Q.E. Hammonds of Birmingham, that hooked us up. The Lord had begun to send, I knew I was going to leave Alabama. Um, there would be pulpit committees that would be sent to our church at Berean, and I wouldn't even know anything about it. So the Lord kind of told me I was going to be leaving. I wasn't necessarily looking for a place to go because the people had treated me great. But I was going to a church in Colorado Springs that was interested in me and my wife, and I was going in the Birmingham airport. I ran into Dr. Hammond. And Dr. Hammond said, "Lonnie Earl, I just left your church." I said, "What do you mean you just left my church?" He said, "I just left your church." I said, "You were in Marion?" He said, "No, I was in Kokomo, Indiana." I said, "What?" He said, "I was at my friend Frank's funeral and I looked over at John Raphael and I said, 'This is Lonnie Earl's church.'" And I was looking at him, I was thinking, it's a little bit too early to be drinking, so I'm not sure what. Long story short, it was prophetic because he's the one. In fact, I didn't even want to send my resume. I didn't know anything about no Kokomo, Indiana. I wasn't looking for a church. I wanted to stay in the South because I love the South. And finally, Dr. Hammers called me, said some words to me that you will find neither in Genesis through any of the books through Revelations. Told me real bad stuff about myself. So finally, I sent the resume in. I didn't pray about it. I sent the resume in, and then they called me, and the Lord just kind of pricked my heart. This is where I want you to be, and the rest is history. Some now next year, will be 21 years later. The God has kissed the ministry and done exceedingly above all that I can even ask to think. This is home for me. I'm so grateful. I'm with probably one of the best churches on this side of heaven, a church that definitely loves the Lord, follows leadership. Um, I don't have the wars of deacons. I think I have 19, 18, 17 deacons, maybe 16 yet, 16 deacons, and we don't have those wars. I have a business manager, I have a great staff. Some of them are in the next room right now, and God's just blessed us, man. So,
And so when now, of course, as pastors have always tell us young pastors, it takes time. So when you first got there compared to now, what were the things that helped you really get to this place that you are now?
um, I I brought the lessons from Alabama here.
Yes, sir.
So and I still stayed in contact with my pastor. He still helped guide me, even though I had 6.5, almost 7 years of experience in Alabama. Getting to uh, Kokomo was still a different part. I was in the Midwest where there's a different culture. So I had learned the culture here, although most of the people in Indiana and Kokomo are from Guthrie, Kentucky, from Clarksville, and from Mississippi. So still, there was a real nice splash of Southern down here, but it was a different culture. So I had to learn it, and I took my time, and um, and I loved on the people. Yeah, loved on the people.
And I think you help a lot of people because, as we talk about loving, as we talk about serving, as we talk about, as you say, take your time, which you've hit on, which is definitely something I think we can all benefit from taking time, loving people, is that even in pastoring, whether it's a young pastor or a pastor who has some training, who has some seasoning, but as you are going into these new assignments, as you are learning different culture, as you are learning things that you are not necessarily even accustomed to, because even though in a sense we do have pastoral experience, people can be different. People can have their own characters, people can have their own personalities, and as you say, there are different cultures. So I would guess I'm just asking is that how do you teach us young preachers this, blend your culture from what you have to a culture that you're going into, making that healthy balance?
Well, uh, you have to remember that you're going into their culture. They're not coming into your culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is best to learn what worked in Alabama. A lot of those precepts and principles did not work in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Being in a churchy city, community, culture, coming to the Midwest where it's not quite as churchy, um, you have to learn how to adapt and not be so dogmatic and this is what we're going to do. as much as learning, again, learning the people and trying to see really what the culture is. For instance, um, revivals. Um, we don't have a lot of evening things, but revivals and so forth at our church starts at 6 o'clock, as opposed to 7 o'clock. Here, it's a factory town. People are shift workers. 7 o'clock is almost too late because they want to be at their house by 9. Um, you just learn how to navigate. You literally ask the Holy Spirit to help you navigate and do things differently, um, that will be effective and relevant in your new assignment. There's a lot of things that I thought, oh, we're going to do the same thing that we did at Berean here. And when I got here, I thought, this is not going to work because this is a different climate, different community, whole different. Some things were transferable, but there were some things that needed to be addressed. Some things needed salt and pepper. Some things just need to be discarded. So, I hope I answered your question.
Oh no, no, you definitely did. But I think it goes back to what you said. We have to learn culture. We have to learn these different things, and and I we've said that a lot today. But I think that's something that's imperative that we all have to really understand is the importance of culture, because culture is a strong determining factor as we look at the church, as we look at where we are right now, and even now as we think about, we're getting closer and closer, as I call it, to post pandemic. But we had to learn a whole different culture even then, because once the pandemic hit us and ministry, and Pastor Anderson has written a book, which I'm going to ask him, we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But even as we think about what the church is now compared to even what the church was pre-pandemic, we had to learn culture. So as you think about the church pre-pandemic, but now you think about the church post-pandemic, what was for you things that you learned, or that you implemented, or that you adapted to for this, as we say, this new culture?
Well, one of the things that I think that has helped this ministry is um, we embraced the fact that things were going to be different. No one knew, March of 2020, that third Sunday the second Sunday, I told our church we're not going to meet. No one knew that it would be like a year and a half later. Um, and so, but throughout the course, the Holy Spirit and just reading and talking and listening to other pastors and just hearing God's voice, I began to tell our church things are going to be different when we come back. So I think one of the things that has really been effective at our church is the leadership, along with the congregation, bought into the fact that things are going to be different. And if we're going to be relevant and effective in this post pandemic era, that we cannot go back to things as usual. I really think that the pandemic was God's way of kicking his grown behind children out of his house for a while so they can grow up a little. And so, there's a lot of things that we're now engaging that we should have been engaging a long time ago with technology. We should have been engaged in that a long time ago. Um, so our church has been very um, progressive as far as trying to improve technology, improve ways of communicating with our people. I think it was in 2021, I think it was in January, a fellow called me, I won't call his name. He says, hey, I'm looking for a musician. I said, look for a musician? He said, yeah. And so he was going on. I asked him about his technology. So no, I don't have that. I don't have a tech person. And so, I just thought basically, dude, bump a musician right now, organist right now. You need a tech guy to keep you communicated and attached to your people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, man, um, technology, embracing technology. I got a TikTok page. I got a
Yeah,
Twitter page. I got
yeah,
a Snapchat page.
yeah.
I got a, you gotta, you got to be flexible, and you got to bend, not bend doctrinally, but I mean, I'm 57 years old, man, and I thank God for my young adult pastor, my youth pastor, who helped me guide our church into some form of relevancy. Um, you know, I don't know if I answered your question right there, but
Oh no, because you know that's something I didn't even want to do, and I'm about to be 33. I didn't want to do TikTok. I was like, man, how do you do it? But now that I do it, it's like, oh man, this is fun. But it's crazy how many more people you actually can reach on TikTok than
yeah,
you can reach on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, because now TikTok is basically the most used social media platform. So now it's like, okay, and let's just be real about this. There is a generation in church, they don't want technology, they don't care for it, they feel like it's unnecessary. But as we look at culture, as we look at way ministry is now, you have to have some form of technology, even if you don't have necessarily the biggest budget to have all the nice cameras or something like that. But I was reading a book by Craig Rochelle that says, and Craig Rochelle was saying that even if you don't have the all of the things that other people have, what you do have, make that the best you do have
sure,
while you have it. So as we look at technology now, we need technology.
sure. You need a budget. Listen, we have incorporated a budget for our audio visual tech. In fact, we have brought on part time a tech guy.
Mhm.
Part of our staff is, hey, listen, we want to be proactive. We want to be progressive as it pertains to. Let me just say this about that group that any doesn't embrace technology. And if you are satisfied with that as pastor, then you're really limiting your church. And
Mhm.
really, that group of people needs to, if they can guarantee that they'll be there 20 years from now, and the church will still be viable and have vitality, then I guess don't get it. But if you're looking at the life of your church and want your church to continue, then you're going to have to embrace some things that maybe you don't even understand.
And like you said, it embrace. Do you think
Hmm.
that, especially as we're talking about post pandemic, but even before, do you think that when we look at the overall culture of church, climate of church, that a lot of times our churches have suffered because we don't want to, and you said it earlier, we don't want to adapt.
Sure. You know, very traditional. Um, People think that tradition is just um, tradition is the church being in love with who she used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that if a church is going to be, um, it's going to have the far-reaching um, desire that they have to get out of the walls into the community and to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, you're going to have to engage. You're going to have to uh, deal with technology. You're going to have to be um, receptive. I didn't know anything about Zoom and all that other stuff. I mean, I'd heard about it, been on a few Zoom conferences, but it really dawned on us early at the onset of the pandemic. And the way I was thinking is, how am I going to stay in contact with my people? How am I going to continue to teach my people? How am I going to continue to engage my people? What venues are out there? Thank God I had young minds and sharp minds, innovative minds who were saying, Pastor, let's try this. It was not necessarily that I came up with everything. It was definitely that the Holy Spirit was leading these minds that were telling me in my ear, let's do this, try this. A lot of things, a lot of the venues I had no idea about. I didn't know what is that. But I'm grateful that the Lord put people in place that loved the Lord and that I could trust. And so we have not looked back. Um, we've not looked back.
Well, I think you said it. Even though you didn't know it, you were at least open to it. Sometimes we run into people who are not open to it. And even, even some of those senior pastors we love and respect and we admire, sometimes you can have a conversation, they may not necessarily be open to it. But once again, as we look at society now, that's the main thing people are looking at. People are on Facebook
Yep.
all day. People still use websites, but the main thing they're using is Facebook and TikTok. So it is important, Instagram. It is important that you do have a social media type of presence. But Doc, you said something else, Pastor, that I think is important. That you had the right people around you, and I want you to just help us as pastors and help pastors understand the importance of having the right team.
Great statement. And you said the key word. It's a team. Um, I think as senior pastors, we cannot be scared or scared uh, to embrace um, this new generation. Um, Charge keep I have to serve this present age. I think it's imperative for me to keep young um, people around me to put in my ear, Pastor, this is the trend, this is what we're doing. And not so much that we are a trendy church, because a trendy church sometimes can be an unhealthy church.
Yes, sir.
Doctrine still is the seedbed that centers us as the church at the Mount Pisgah Baptist Church doctrine. But I think you need a group of people that can see things that you don't necessarily see, or aware of things that you. If if our church had to rely on my understanding or my giftedness with technology, we would still be with the two Dixie cups at the string, talking like this. So it's no good. You have to have a team of people that you trust. And remember, you know the direction of the church, but you don't know all the nuances of different things. So you can't be scared. You have to be very comfortable with who you are as a senior pastor to accept in meetings, in Zoom meetings, ideas of, and people are saying terminologies and saying stuff that you have not the foggiest idea what that heck they're talking about. But you have to trust them, and you have to be led by the Spirit, and uh, not be content or stagnant. Because I think the worst thing that can happen to a church is not bullheaded deacons, but a stagnant pastor.
Mm, mm. Now I think you've helped us again with this stagnant pastor, and I'm glad you said it because you've been an inspiration to me just from afar for years, just watching you. Because one thing I love about Pastor Anderson is one who always is traveling, learning. You may go to I've seen you go to this conference, I see you go to that conference, just because you're always traveling, learning, which I've always find that inspirational. So when as you're talking about not being a stagnant pastor, then what is important? How can a pastor avoid stagnation? But does a pastor have to have that type of zeal burning to want to continue to grow? How do pastors grow? How do pastors help their churches grow? But as you say, a church can't grow if the pastor's not growing. So how does a pastor themselves take it upon themselves to grow?
Dr. Kimbrough said another thing to me. He said, Lonnie Earl, if you want shade, you have to be with things that are taller than you. And
Mm,
so I try to associate myself with minds that are inspirational, minds that are ever learning. Um, as a senior pastor, I'm still being poured into by other pastors. My mentors pour into me. My Some of the sages that are in my life have been stable sages in my life. Uh, they still pour into me. So I always try to put myself in a position that I am learning new stuff, new techniques. I am learning different ways of even preaching, different ways of looking at the text, different ways of ministry, different ways of communicating. One of the reasons why I went back and got my doctorates is because I wanted to give more to the church that I'm at right now. Um, and so I think one of the best one of the best ways to do it is to be around people. If you are the smartest person in the room, your room is too small. If you are the wisest person in your room, in your circle is way too small. And it's interesting when I'm around some of my mentors, I'm around some of these fellas. Uh, I don't do a whole lot of talking. And in some ways, I am an introvert. And people don't believe that, but in some ways, I'm an introvert. I like to just sit and listen. I like to, while I have while I'm in their company, I just like to listen to them, man, and just observe them. I observe. I, I think about Dr. Ray when I'm around him, especially when I'm at New Salem and that big old church, and how he is a people pastor, and how the line is lined up from here all the way almost to the back. And every person, he says their name and says something intimate. How's your mother doing? How's your brother doing? Your sister, did she get over that cold? I mean, lines and lines and lines of people. And that just taught me it's really, you're there as an under shepherd. It's really, God is trusting you to take care of his sheep. And it's really about people. It's about it's about loving it's about loving people, man.
So now when you talk about mentorship, who are some of your mentors, or who are those who you still just like glean from that still help you on a daily basis?
On a daily basis. Dr. Billy Bell, Dr. V.K. Jones, Dr. James Morgan. Oh wow, I hate that you said that. Anthony Pettis, Dr. Ray, um, oh my God, Jonathan Carter. Uh, Man, I get so many different things from so many. I'm oh just this a plethora of preaching personalities that are still pouring in me. I hate to even mention those names now. I probably missed a whole bunch of names. I had so many different sages now that are gone. Um, um, Uncle Woody, Kimbrough, Dr. Rowland, Dr. Cannon, Dr. C.P. Nobles. All of them are gone. And I mean, I am the product of so many unselfish preachers that poured into me. I am that product.
And the reason I asked that question is because of what you just did, because it shows us that when God gives you these different mentors, there's something you can learn from each person, something you can observe, because even with those legends that we love, those sages, they all had something different. They all had something unique. They all had something that stood out. So God can use so many different people to really help and pour into you, and showing you the importance of being just yourself.
Yes, indeed. That man, I guess I learned that from Dr. Kimbrough, my pastor, more than anything. Be yourself. I don't have to, man. I'm not trying to be like anybody. I am comfortable, uh, and I understand that God uses uh, through the Holy Spirit uses my personality to reach people, and I don't have to. I don't feel pressured at all to be or to act. I'm not intimidated by other people's ministry. In fact, I applaud other people's ministry. Jealousy is not one of the things that that bind me. Might have some other things that are whatever, but jealousy is. I'm happy for preachers, and I love preachers, and I got that from Pastor Kimbrough. I love helping preachers. In fact, all of my nephews, I got more nephews than I could ever even dream of around the country. They call me Unc. It's interesting. When I was young, your age, Brown, I had unks. Now I'm Unc. And at the convention last year, a fellow walked up to me and said, "Hey, pops." I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." So man, God's poured so much in me that I think it's a delight and it's a privilege to even share with young minds like yourself. So it's it's all God, man.
And it's important to pay it forward. A
Yes,
friend,
sir.
a friend of mine, Pastor, big bro of mine, Pastor Wendell Parker, he told me that one day because anytime I would tell him I would come in town, he would be kind enough to let me preach when he was still pastoring Ebenezer Baptist Church in Oklahoma City. But he told me something one day. He said, "The kindness I've shown to you, I hope you would show that to somebody else down the line."
Yeah.
So even where I am now, by the grace of God, there are times I've had to be out, but I've, just wanted to give another associate that opportunity, a young associate, like, because I know how many did it for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely important to pay it forward.
Yes, sir. Again, I'm the product of a lot of unselfish pastors who've seen in me stuff that I didn't even see in myself.
Right. Well, I got a couple more because I'm gonna let you go, but I appreciate you just your willingness to. I know you're busy, but I appreciate your willingness. So then, just talk to us then for just a few minutes about the importance of just education for pastors, because we live in a society now where it is important to have that theological education. Just what's the importance of theological education?
I think school is it might not be for everyone, but I'm recommending it for everyone. I think there's something about the discipline of learning, the discipline of formal religious training. I think that there's a discipline in that. Um, a lot of things, again, you'll learn your biggest lessons um, in actually in the ministry, doing the work, but I think that there is a discipline that comes with um, formal education. And so I would encourage um, every preacher to pursue some form of learning. I'm ever learning. Someone asked me, now that I've gotten my doctorates, am I thinking about a PhD? And I told them, no, I'm too old for that. But I am encouraging pastors like Pastor G. Chris Brown to get their uh, bachelor's, master's, and doctorates and their PhDs. I am definitely encouraging that. But Pastor Lonnie Earl Anderson Jr. Is 57 years old and eyes tired, and and that's it. In fact, the Lord has blessed me with 5 degrees, 5 earned degrees, and that's it, bro. I'm not doing it anymore. But the importance of it, there's a discipline that I learned. There's a discipline, and I'm encouraging um, pastors to go and learn and get formal education. Get tools of how to dive into God's word and to bring out those precious gems. Yeah. So there's a great discipline in formal education.
Thank you. Yes, I'm currently working on my PhD as we speak. Thank you. First semester was a little challenge, but now just but I also do plan. Even after I get done, I plan to go because I've always said I wanted to get 2 master's degrees. So, but as you say, learning is something that we should never stop doing because we should always want to continue to grow and reading, having
Yes,
an extensive library.
yes, sir. Read, read, read. I've been so engulfed in my doctoral work in reading. Of course, as you know, reading, 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 having sometimes 9 books to read for one class, and so that's really been. But now I'm getting back. Uh, I've I've got my life back, and so now I'm getting into some books that I've for the last 3 years been in a doctoral program. That's 3 years. Now I got a list of books. Amazon would come to my house almost every other week with books and so forth. Now I'm just thinking which book I'm going to tackle first, which book I'm going to dive into. Now that I got my life back, and so yeah, so
Now you wrote a book. Talk to us about the book that you wrote.
it's called Partnering with Pastors and Church Leaders, Closing the Back Door. God has used that. In fact, that He's really opened up a lot of doors. Um, it really has been significant. It deals with helping the pastor and leaders of that church um, assimilate new members from membership to ministry, from salvation to service. It deals with having something in place that will stop the horrible mass exodus from the church. It's interesting that for every um, I think for every 72 people that join your church in January, only three of them will be um, still engaged that next January. And it's really to help stop that horrible cycle of people joining church on Sunday. You might see them the next Sunday. You might see them maybe a month after that, then you don't see them anymore. It's really about training church leaders. It's about shifting our thinking in the church to accommodate. It also deals with having a climate where church new members are accepted, when new members are cultivated and cared for.
Yeah, I may need you to come to Kentucky, or we figure out something to do virtual with that, because that you and some others I have in mind, just because I would just want, myself to stay on the cutting edge, but also want our church to continue to grow and to
Yeah.
stay on the cutting edge as well. Well, is there anything else on your heart that you want to share, that you want to express before we get done?
Man, I just want to say to you, thank you so much, man. This is a privilege. I do a lot of podcasts. My nephews, and they're telling me. In fact, my young adult pastor said, "Pastor, you need a podcast." Wait a minute, let me just ask: is this a podcast?
So this is StreamYard, but this is kind of something like that. But you can't do a podcast. I mean, you can use Anchor, you can use Podbean. There are different ways you can start a podcast.
You just spoke in tongues, and I have no idea what you're saying. But if I write Anchor and Podbean down, they'll know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
they know.
I just want to say thank you so much. And I too have followed you from afar. I appreciate your commitment to doctrine. Thank you for your commitment to engage preachers and have a conversation, a dialogue, a platform where preachers can come and be themselves and to pour into others. And I appreciate you, Brown, so much. Appreciate you so
Well,
much.
well, I appreciate that. Also, tell them about your church and the things that's going on in Mount Pisgah and where they can find you. So, yeah.
Oh, well, you can find us on Facebook at Mount Pisgah Missionary Baptist Church. You can find us on Instagram, the Mount Kokomo. You can find us on X, the Mount Kokomo. You can find us on, let me see, what other, there's a green one, Instagram, the Mount Kokomo. Um, it's a great church. God is doing some amazing things here. Um, the Lord has just literally kissed this ministry. Um, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else other than here. If you're ever in the city of Kokomo, Indiana, come to 1599 East Sycamore Street. You'll definitely find a church that loves God and will be willing to love on you.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you all so much for this. I'm going to ask Pastor stay on for 1 second after we get done with this live. But listen, like, comment, and share this live. Pray that you've been blessed. I know I've been blessed. And we thank God once again for Pastor Lonnie Anderson for his kindness on to us, for us today. So God bless you. God keep you is our prayer.